Okay, hey team. Welcome and welcome back. Hermitarius here. Today we're going to talk about, this is the overview. This is my script. This is my planning. Today we're going to talk about semisextiles and quincunxes, which are a version in traditional astrology. So all other minor or non-traditional aspects require some kind of math, which is these are the non-traditional or the minor aspects that you don't really need to math out. Just like how we can have something here, and if they're at the same degree, would be like that's a square. Something here and something here at the same degree would be a semisextile. Whereas if you're trying to do all the other things, it's not an exact multiple of 30. You have to do other kind of math on it. So these are the ones that I've been working with because you can see it, and we'll get into like how can you see if they work for your chart or if you should be trying to learn what they are. And so semisextiles and quincunxes are considered a version, which means they have no line of sight to the reference point that you're considering or as the baseline for all reference points to the ascendant. So this is why second, 6, 8, and 12th houses are considered like bad or hard houses, the blind or the dark houses, because from the reference point of the ascendant, which is our main reference point for any chart pulled, this is generally what we care about. These places traditionally they can't see it, and so they don't really have a handle on it, they can't witness it, they're not in charge if there's something here to the ascendant. They're not talking to each other. But you can do that from anything, right? So you can have a placement in your fourth house, and then it's going to be quincunx to both the ninth and the 11th whole sign house, and it's going to be semisextile to both the third and the fifth whole sign house, okay? So here's another overview of our aspects. We have the conjunction, which is considered like a 0 degree, and it's anything in the same sign is like more broadly in a sign-based aspect called the conjunction, or they're co-present together. And then we have sextiles, which in sign-based is just from this sign to that sign, and in degree-based is more closely a 60-degree aspect. And if you're confused about the degrees, like let's look at one of these guys, right? So we've got 0 to 180, 0 to 90, 0 to 60, 0 to 30, 0 to 120, 0 to 150, right? That's what we mean by degrees. Like it's using circular degrees in how we talk about that. Okay, so we can see that, the opposition is 180. We're not pulling that number out anywhere. It's coming from the 360-degree circle, right? So the 30 degree and the 150 degree are in aversion. That doesn't mean nothing. That has a meaning. So for me, aversion is an aspect because we care if something's in aversion. It's not just, oh, it doesn't mean anything. He can't see it, so don't worry about it. Discard. We care that somebody's here. We care that someone's in aversion. So to me, it's not like it's not an aspect, don't worry about it. It's like it's not in aspect. Interpret that. Bring that into your delineation. And so these places are also kind of considered like blind spots. Not only are they blind as in witnessing, but then they become like a blind spot in the life. Like, what kind of control do you really have about it, right? Okay, so that is us talking about the wheel. And now these are pages from Sue Tompkins' Aspects in Astrology, which is one of the first astrology books I read from my library, and it's a book I now own. This book deals more in ABC or natural astrology, so I don't turn to it all the time, but it is still a reference that I have. So that's the information for the quincunx and the sextile. You can pause it and read it if you want. I am going to read it out loud, and this is kind of the summary for it. Page 60 to 62 of the, what edition do I have? 2002 edition from, who's the publisher? Destiny Books. Okay, so the quincunx and semisextile, division of the circle by multiples of 12. The quincunx. Signs in quincunx do not confront each other as with the opposition, or get in each other's way as with the square. They are coming from such completely different places and heading in such different directions they don't even see each other. rather like two planes on unrelated flight paths. To become conscious of our quincunxes seems to take even more effort than to become aware of the other types of conflict in our charts. This is entirely speculation, but I don't think that this is because the material is more deeply buried, as perhaps with the semisquares and sesquiquadrate aspects, but because that material is really much less important and thus tends to get pushed into the background. Whereas a square or opposition might be descriptive of major conflict to be resolved and thus by extension major drama to be enacted in the life, the quincunx is more descriptive of some kind of additional irritation and stress. Imagine a person whose relationship is in a state of crisis and who is also just about to lose their job. The life is full of tremendous conflict. They come home and the kitchen is badly in need of decorating. The sight of it further undermines how they feel. It seems to me that the quincunx operates at the level of the shabby kitchen. There is a psychology behind this aspect and often a physical manifestation, but these issues tend to be a secondary importance. An individual usually chooses, indeed is forced, to deal with the central life issues as shown by the major aspects before they can turn their attention to the conflicts described by their quincunxes. Charles Carter and many other astrologers have linked this aspect with illness and even death, mostly I think because the 6th and 8th houses quincunx the ascendant. Personally, I can neither confirm nor deny this, but there is some logic to the idea. For surely many health problems are caused by those things that continually produce stress and undermine us but are not so colossal that we are forced to deal with them. Thus I suspect that if quincunxes do sometimes give rise to health problems, those problems are not likely to be life-threatening, but more in the nature of everyday constitutional weaknesses that both are caused by and create an underlying irritation in the life. There seems to be a lack of rhythm and an awkwardness about the energy of a quincunx, a kind of disorganization, which is probably why this aspect tends to feel niggly and uncomfortable. It's rather like a small piece of grit in a shoe. If you adjust your foot a bit, then it really isn't that bad. As with any other difficult aspect, the purpose of the uncomfortableness of the quincunx is to bring something to our attention so that we can deal with it. The main problem of the quincunx, as many astrologers have noted, is that it is too passive an aspect to deal with, without considerable conscious effort anyway, with the conflict. In fact, it is not so much conflict as friction. Signs in quincunx share neither mode nor element, and at first glance seem to have nothing in common with each other. After all, what does Cancer have in common with Aquarius, Taurus with Sagittarius, Pisces with Leo? There are important exceptions to this rule, as in the case of Taurus and Libra, which are both ruled by Venus, or Aries and Scorpio, which share Mars as a ruler. But most quincunxes don't seem to have much in common, and I think this is the strength of this contact, as well as the cause of the friction. If we look at a given sign and consider what it might need most to make it less lopsided and more whole, it might well be the qualities of those signs with which it is in quincunx aspect. For example, one could make a case for saying that Pisces, which is so selfless, positively needs the egocentricity of Leo and vice versa. Aquarius needs to be softened by the familial, caring qualities of Cancer, whilst that sign could do with some of the detachment of Aquarius. Signs in quincunx and also in semisextile keep each other's more extreme manifestations in check. Oppositions clearly do this too, but they operate by pulling in the opposite direction, whereas the energy of a quincunx will come from a completely different source. Thus, quincunxes do not give rise to the extremism of the opposition aspect. One thing I have noticed about quincunxes is the frequency with which they occur in synastry, not so much exact quincunxes by degree, but certainly by sign. In close personal relationships and also in working partnerships, sign quincunxes seem to me to be at least as common as oppositions and possibly more so. One partner's sun sign is often quincunx to the other person's sun or ascendant sign. What this means is not clear to me, but it may be related to the idea that the 8th and 6th houses are quincunx to the ascendant. The most significant relationships that we form usually involve the other person's planets falling in our 8th house or ours in theirs. And here I am particularly thinking of the personal planets or the ascendant sign. This should not be surprising, for important relationships magically transform the person we are and involve the very deepest emotional interchanges. A fair number of these relationships are started at work, sixth house, and certainly their success or failure has great bearing on our health and sense of well being. Perhaps, too, quincunxes are common in synastry because of the idea that quincunx signs seem to have so little in common and thus potentially so much to offer each other. Whilst quincunxes do sometimes provide new insight and information, more often they seem merely to add confirmation and perhaps a refinement of other factors already described in the horoscope. Thus, my view of the aspect at the present time is that it can be considered to be of secondary rather than primary importance. The semisextile. Charles Carter says he believes this aspect to be of negligible importance unless it is implicated in a larger formation, and I must say I am inclined to share this view. Like quincunxes, semisextiles often support and confirm other information already in the chart, and this can often be seen particularly in progressions. Semisextiles also sometimes seem to act as linking factors. For example, if there were two completely separate aspects in a chart which were only linked by a semisextile aspect, then perhaps there would be a single complex of energy as opposed to two. Perhaps each sub-personality, as shown by the two major aspects, would be better able to see and integrate with the other more readily than if the semisextile were not present. And as Carter says, it is plain that a strong emphasis on two consecutive signs should have a potentially harmonious value. This condition ought to make for a definite career as distinct from the scattered composition of some horoscopes, which indicates a diffusion of interests. It is a sort of integration by concentration. So that is the overview from Sue Tompkins on the quincunx and the semisextile. So let's go back to the whiteboard. So, no line of sight. We did the Sue Tompkins part. And now I want to come back to the wheel. So if we have, let's start with Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sag, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. So this idea of like consecutiveness or like our harmonious concentration that we were talking about with the semisextile that Sue Tompkins said that Charles Carter talked about with the semisextile, we can maybe say that, if we have a stellium of a whole bunch of planets in one sign, that means if a big baddie like Saturn comes through, each of these planets is getting conjunct, and then he moves on and it's crickets. Or if Mars is over here, they're going to get square, 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 and then he'll go retrograde maybe, and they'll go square, 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 and then he'll go direct and go square, square, square. And so a stellium is like a concentration of energy because all of your life themes that are tied into the planets here and the places they rule and the planets in there, they're all going to shuffle down into being impacted by what's going on. You can stretch that out and say that if you have like a really quadrant heavy chart and all of your planets are smushed into consecutive signs, it's kind of like an extended stellium. There's going to be shifts in like energy or in how it presents because the house themes will change and the sign expression will change. But if you have Saturn going through this house and then this house and then this house, it's going to have that stellium feel of hit, no break, and then a whole big break where things are not being impacted like together. The more spread out it is, the less breaks you have, because if you have something here all the way down to here, by the time Saturn gets here, well, now he's going to be talking to this place again from a different angle, right? So the more concentrated, like the tighter the stellium or the more concentrated a quadrant of a chart, like all the placements, the more as like a run it's going to play, right? We also talk about sign similarities when we are going around, and this is a fun exercise to do throughout your practice, right? So you can say that Aries is about like me, I'm going to act. And then Taurus is like me, but I'm not going to act, I'm going to receive. And I'm going to like kind of get busy with what I want. And then Gemini is like want, but I have many wants. And then Cancer is like many people like need care and nurturing. And then Leo was like, I'm going to nurture me, right? You can, this is a fun exercise to do where it's like, what is, you know, think of maybe two or three things that a sign represents. And just like your parent is some kind of way, and then you grow up thinking, like, I'm nothing like them, but like you're still like 50% like them. Try as you might, you can't drop it all. So Aries is going to be some way, and then we go down to Taurus, and Taurus is going to be like at least 50% like Aries because they have this consecutive nature, but then there's going to be something that's like, I'm nothing like you, I'm my own person. But like, you can't be, you're not entirely your own person, it just came from there, right? And then Gemini is going to have the same effect there, and Cancer is going to have the same effect there. As well, with our house angularity, you know that every second house from any place is operating in like a supportive role. So if they have absolutely nothing to do with each other, if they're at odds with each other, then like where would that support be coming from? And so the sextile has the opportunity, or the semi-sextile has the opportunity to be kind of supported and have a linkage because things are going to flow in one, you know, expected direction. But also there's going to be a little bit of friction there because I'm not you, I'm me, right? I'm not like that, I'm something else. And there's a shift every time we move, not only in element, but in modality and in ruler. The only two places that double up in ruler are going to be these two, and then you could maybe consider that the two luminary signs are together, but I mean, they've got different bodies, so different bodies ruling them, so maybe not. So really the only two places where it's like I rule it and I rule it is Saturn signs here. So that is for the semi-sextile and the idea of like what is similar and what's different between these signs, what makes them kind of support each other, as well as you expand the idea of a stellium and like things are going to progress, they're just going to keep going together in like one melody, discordant as it may be. The other thing I like to do with the semi-sextile is to consider like you've got two actors on a stage and they're interacting with each other for the benefit of the audience, like the rest of the chart. And so while, you know, actor one is acting on actor two is not like turning to look at actor one to be like, I can see what you're doing. They're faced out towards the rest of the theater, right? And so the things that actor one is doing to actor two, like, does actor two, you know, it's part of the play, but does actor two have an ability to be like, stop, I can see what you're doing? Like, no, it's part of the comedy, right? So then we can talk about the quincunx. Now, Sue Tompkins has in that passage the idea that something in one place can benefit from the areas that are quincunx to it, right? Like Virgo can do with like the expansive ideas of Aquarius, and with the like, you don't need to nitpick every little thing, just get it done of Aries, right? So that's one way to look at it. Another way that can be fun to look at it is with kind of what's similar between them, and is that why they have this like little friction piece where we talk about how signs of the same modality and the square and the opposition have friction because it's like there's too much similarity. So the example is, do Virgo and Aquarius and Aries all actually care about the same thing? They just care about it in such completely different ways that they've got like nothing to do with each other. They're not going to find each other at the same event because they have the same like motivation, the same core idea that they want to bring into the world, but they're on ships in the night. They're on completely different flight paths, as Sue said. So here is my example of doing that one time in one of my journals. So it's like Aquarius is quincunx to both Cancer and Virgo, and like what do they all care about? Caring, like, you know, the idea of wanting to do stuff for other people or wanting to serve or show up for other people. And Aquarius wants to do it in a cerebral way, Cancer wants to do it in a feeling way, and Virgo wants to do it in like a practical service way. What can I do for you, right? Cancer wants to hold space for your feelings, and Aquarius wants to like mentally, verbally hash it out with you, right? So this is another little exercise that's fun to do from time to time. Some of them are challenging. Some of them are challenging to figure out what what we want to be. What do you consider similarities between these signs that have very little to do with each other? Because if we reset our wheel here, we can put in, what is a sign. We can put out the building blocks to see like who's talking to who has something similar. So we've got our modality, which is cardinal, fixed, mutable, cardinal, fixed, mutable. And then we can do our elements, which is fire, or if you want, you can break that down into the qualities, hot and dry. And then we have earth, which is cold and dry, air, which is hot and wet, water, which is cold and wet. And you can continue on with that. That's going to continue in the same way that the modality does. So if we want to look at Aries to Scorpio and Virgo, what do these quincunxes have to do with this guy? Nothing. We've got the three different modalities. So at least they're not trying to take the same role, but they also maybe don't understand like the motivation each of them has. Like, what are you doing here? I'm here to start something. I'm here to work at something. I'm here to be the change. Like, okay, we've got nothing to talk about. We've got a fire and a water and an earth. So none of that has the flow of a trine or of the sextile being similar. And then we can look at the qualities. We've got hot and dry, cold and wet, cold and dry. So this dryness can talk to each other, but the coldness and then the modality is going to conflict. And then, we've got Scorpio and Aries ruled by the same planet, but they're such vastly different expressions that an Aries might be like, get out of your mind and do something. And Scorpio might be like, slow down and feel something for once, right? Like they clash. And my special note about Aries, Scorpio, and Taurus, Libra specifically is that these personal planets, it's like you can't have it all. So like you can maybe have access to both signs if you're not in them, but if you're in one and if you have that full expression, like if his Mars is in Aries, Scorpio is going to be probably like the furthest thing from you for the Mars sign, right? And then we can take this and go back to the semisextile and see that maybe part of the flow of being helpful is because every two signs we do have a matchup of one type of quality, if this is the way you use the temperamental qualities, right? So fire and earth are both dry, air and water are both wet, right? So there is something to talk about there. They get it, but then everything else flips and switches and goes opposite. That is going into the wheel. One more time. Let's go back to the screen. So here's the example of my chart. I know a lot of people, myself included, get annoyed when astrologers will talk about their own chart. It's like, can't you give me a different example? But I'm not trying to be a teacher or a lecturer. I'm coming to you student to student, sharing my example. And like there is no chart I know better than mine because I also don't really consult or like look at celebrity charts. As well as I do see on the Reddit a lot, like in the beginner subs, people will be like, how come I never see someone talking extensively about their own chart? That would be so helpful. And so I'm gonna do it here. So what I did in Astrology is I turned on the quincunx and the semisextile, which are going to be these little green lines, and then over in the aspectarian they're going to show up as well. So we can see that my chart has these quincunxes from Sun to Jupiter up in Cancer, and we have Venus being quincunx to my MC, and we have Saturn being quincunx to my South Node. Now, those two being quincunx to something on an axis like the MC and the node means that they're also going to be semisextile to the other side of that axis. So Venus is also semisextile to my IC and Saturn is semisextile to my North Node, right? And we can see that here. Sun, quincunx, Jupiter, Venus, semisextile to Mars, right? We also have that here. We've got 25-degree Venus coming over to 25-degree Mars. And then right at the bottom, I'm trying not to pull up that bottom bar, we have Venus Quincunx to the MC, which also means semisextile to the IC. Okay, so that's my example chart, and then we just can blow it up a bit because it's very busy and the lines are very short, so it can be hard to see everything that's going on, right? So that's how you can see it in the chart and in the aspect terrain. If you turn, you have to go turn on the setting to include quincunxes, so I'll just show you where that is. So in this chart on AstroSeek, down in the extended house settings below the chart, you can click on minor aspects, and you can click on if you want things to aspect the nodes, Lilith, Chiron, these other places that some people don't use aspects to because they're more points or they're not as prominent as the traditional planets. And then you can also set if you want the true or the mean nodes, where it actually is, or the average over time, because these guys wibble wobble a lot. Okay, so that's how you can do that. And before I get into some of the other examples I have, what I want is to show, like, so how do you track it? How do you know if semisextiles and quincunxes are something you should pay attention to? Because they're not traditional aspects. So if you see somebody making a semisextile or a quincunx, you might, be persuaded to ignore it and be like, well, that doesn't count. It's not actually witnessing or talking or aspecting my natal planet, so I'm going to ignore it. But there's only so many times you can open a chart and be like, oh, something's quincunx. Oh, something's like directly by degree and minute semisextile. And like if you're opening a chart because you're like, I wonder what's up today, and that's the only thing going on, there's only so many times you can do that before you're like, maybe these minor aspects aren't so minor in my life particularly. And if you have a chart that doesn't have a lot of visibility between planets, and the quincunx and the semisextile are some of the only things available, then yeah, it might be more prominent. So this is my chart, and this is my planets all listed out in order, the way you would kind of expect it. So I was using Lilith mean when I wrote this many years ago, and now I'm using Lilith true. So Lilith mean is at 8, and then my ascendant is at 9, and then Pluto's at 17, and then Juno's at 19, and then I go sign by sign, right, in little groups of signs of where things are. That's fine. You can also just look at the chart to see what's going on with that. But what I have done, and what is like a game changer for figuring out if these minor aspects, the semisextile and the quincunx, because you don't need math for them, it's just going to line up exactly with a degree, is to go over and write everything kind of by degree order in absolute. So not absolute like out of 360, but you're going to look and see, okay, I've got 3 degrees sun. Do I have anything before 3 degrees? Well, I've got 2 degrees Jupiter, and if I were to make this list now, I would see that I've got 0 degrees Lilith, if I wanted Lilith on here. So I can put at the beginning of my list Lilith, and then Jupiter at 2, and then Sun at 3, Hygeia at 4, Eros at 5, Uranus at 7, Pallas at 7, Lilith mean at 8, ascendant and descendant at 9, and so on. So now, if I have something showing up at 22 degrees Taurus, it doesn't matter that I've got moon in Sagittarius and Taurus can't see Sagittarius. The only like planet, these are asteroids, the only planet that's at 22 degrees is the moon. So it doesn't matter to me anymore that the quincunx or the semisextile is like, well, the degree is exact, or it's like really close, but traditionally they don't aspect, so I'm going to ignore it. Like, not anymore. I'm going to see that they're going to line up, and I'm going to start to build what does quincunx, what does semisextile mean for me in my life based on tracking the transits that way. Take away the sign barriers, arrange it by numerical order of the degrees, and then if you've got something in the chart and you open it up and you're like, this feels Venusian. Where's Venus today? Venus is at 3 Scorpio. Okay, do I have anything around 3? Yeah, I've got all these things at around 3. And, they're in aspect from Scorpio, but if they weren't, I would pay attention to that. I wouldn't disregard it. So here is a transit chart for me today, like while I was setting up this PowerPoint, and we can just see where the different quincunxes and semisextiles are showing up. So we have Venus, she's making a square to the sun and a trine to Jupiter, so those are fine. We have Sun making a conjunction to natal Pluto, a sextile to natal Saturn, and a square to natal node, so that's fine. But now we have Mars, who just came off of a quincunx to Jupiter while coming into a sextile with the Sun. We have Jupiter opposing natal Venus, but unable traditionally to aspect the MC and the IC, because that would be a semisextile and a quincunx, and unable to aspect Mars, natal Mars at 25 Sag, by another quincunx. So am I to take that Jupiter applying to an opposition with Venus is the only theme with Jupiter in this part of my chart right now, or am I meant to also include ideas of Mars doing in the second house of like what supports you, including like your own personal talent and skill, and the IC axis of doing work, public work, vocation, career, where is the Sun ruling Leo down here in my fourth house at home in the private life, in the private sphere, right? Like at some point, I've got to pay attention to all that. Moon, meanwhile, yeah, is having a trine not only to transiting Sun but to natal Pluto, and is coming into opposition with natal Saturn, but is also in aversion to natal nodes. So again, do I ignore this flavor here of the semisextile to the south node and the quincunx to the north node, or do I include it, right? And then Saturn as well. Saturn and Jupiter in a trine. Saturn can square natal Mars at 25. Saturn can sextile natal Venus at 25. Saturn is semisextile and thus in aversion traditionally to natal IC and MC. But, you know, with what I've been doing since Saturn moved back into Pisces and is going over these points, do I think that's connected or not? Right? Okay, so we did that thing, and now we know how to list the chart out in a couple different ways and how we begin to notice. Once you start tracking transits, you can begin to build your own meanings of what's coming up, right? Beyond the traditional words that you're fed as like this is what it's supposed to mean. So I have some other examples that I want to do, like I have an idea with the lunar phases, and we already did the one with like the stage, but I have another one with the stage. So we'll do this here. Okay, so for the lunar phases, there's this idea of the square is when you put in effort, action, energy, and then that kind of flows with the trine being of the nature of Jupiter, and you can talk about trines in the basics video and in the modality video and in any Thema Mundi video. And then we come into the opposition at 180, which is like an illumination. It's like a point of punctuation somewhere in the sentence. And so this little momentum, this trajectory from the flow of the trine into the peak, the culmination of the opposition, like what is happening here? And for me, there's this idea of momentum. Like something happened here and it's going to come here and it's just going to follow through, right? And whatever efforts you installed and instilled in your actions, if you're maintaining them through here, then that's going to maintain through. And if you kind of let it go, then it's just going to have a trajectory all its own based on what came before and the environment it's in. Right? So there's this idea of like momentum, where things are already in motion. Similarly, for the semisextile, you know, the other way to look at this is that we consider the new moon to be like a 3-day thing, the day of the new moon, the day before, and the day after. And in that whole time, moon moves about 14 degrees a day, so that's going to be just over 30 degrees of travel, right? And so when moon enters into this 30-degree range, it's like already the new moon. And when moon enters into this 30-degree range of the opposition, it's already the full moon. Unless you're like really looking close, it's gonna look just as full as on the exact time, right? And the whole thing is considered kind of full. So there's this idea of, yeah, momentum and trajectory, and things are already in motion, and you don't have your hands on it because it's already in motion, right? Like you can't, the time for adjustments and changing trajectories, that's gone. Now we just have to coast into the next time that we can get our hands onto it, right? At the opposition or at the conjunction. Or back into the trine and the sextile, right? The next time you have some kind of positive influence instead of direct influence on something. So back to my chart here. This is my chart with the quincunxes and the semisextiles highlighted. And I'm just going to give some example of my chart. So I've got Moon and Jupiter quincunx, and I've got Mars in there as well, but Moon rules Jupiter, but he can't see Cancer from Sagittarius. Jupiter rules Moon, but can't see Sagittarius from Cancer. Moon and Mars are my chart rulers, my sectile and the ruler of my ascendant, and Jupiter has a superior trine to my ascendant. And so all of these planets have something to do with like wanting to support me and show up for me. Mars and Moon can't, they have no access. That's a semisextile. They're rising up to support, but it's like that trajectory is already there. I don't have handle on it. Mars does not have witness on the ascendant. Mars does not have his hands on the wheel of the ship of my life. He's not at the helm, right? Jupiter's coming over in this superior trine, like catching up to my ascendant, and so that's lovely, but they don't talk to each other at all. So what am I supposed to do with that? My example for this is the movie The Holiday with Kate Winslet and Cameron Diaz, where these people have never met, they love each other's houses, and there's full trust for each to be there. And so my experience with the quincunx specifically seems to be lining up into like, no, you can't do anything about it. And instead of fearing that it's going to come to the worst, why don't you just assume trust is there? Why don't I just assume that there's trust between this house, and then a disposition loop that they have over 5 houses in my chart, including my ascendant and thus me and both my chart rulers? And what if I assumed there was an area of trust between this place and this place, which are very close together? Sun just moved off of a trine to Jupiter because Jupiter's going backwards here, so they're not going to meet again. And so instead of thinking that they have nothing to do with each other, or that this is going to be a source of friction and something that spirals me at the end of a long day when I'm dealing with other bigger stuff, what if I instead switch that into the idea of trust, and that resources are there and you have permission, and you don't need direct permission because it's already been set up in the contract, like in the movie The Holiday, that you're allowed to be there and everybody's okay with it and everybody is happy that it's happening, right? I kind of want to show my solar return chart. So here's my solar return chart for this year, which has my MC IC axis flipped, so they're directly on each other, and it has my ascendant on essentially Jupiter at 305, which is, Sun at 306. That is pretty much exactly quincunx. Am I to assume that they've got nothing to do with each other when this is the year that I have begun shining from my home, bringing my work into my home? And these signs have nothing to do with each other. These signs have nothing to do with each other. And this is like the year I'm having in solar return technique. Like, come on. At some point, I have to stop ignoring aversion, like having aversions be an aversion, and I have to start paying attention to, no, they mean something in my chart specifically in my life. And maybe it's totally different for yours. And maybe they are the more frustrating aspects. But this is how I have begun to approach it. So I'm not saying that this idea of momentum and trust is true for everybody and that's how you should look at quincunxes and semisextiles. I'm saying you should begin to track it in whatever way is interesting to you, and from there begin to decode what those situations may mean. The other thing I've noticed is there's too many transits where the only beneficial thing is Jupiter at 22 degrees, in the sign of Cancer, directly quincunxing my moon in the house of support. They've got nothing to talk about, but that is when I get an email saying confirm some information so we can see if you can get subsidy for your housing, right? But no, they've got nothing to do with each other. You know what I mean? So, we did the holiday, we did these things. My final note on this trust idea is that with, let's combine my personal ideas of like maybe it's about trust and like you don't need to worry about it. It is going to work out. There's momentum there. And then we combine that with the established ideas of a quincunx being like a little bit of a friction, a little bit of something that doesn't quite go your way and it sets you off. And so I am going to like add in that maybe this trust and this hope and this momentum that comes from my quincunxes and my semisextiles, and especially in mundane transits that are affecting my chart that I notice, maybe it's not actually as helpful. Like maybe with the housing subsidy, idea that I gave, maybe that hope that I got from seeing that transit happen when I got the email saying like give us some information so we can try to give you subsidy. Maybe I don't get the subsidy. Maybe that's what the quincunx means. Like you have just enough hope to keep you going to give you the momentum, but then it still comes to nothing. I don't know. I will let you know if I get the housing subsidy, and then that will help me confirm or deny, what the quincunx means for me, especially from nicer planets. Okay, so that's my final note on that. Okay, now I'm going to go into like a tangent about retrogrades because I think that the semisextile and the quincunx have something to say about that. Okay, so the example is going to be that we've got some kind of planet here in the ascendant or, planet A, and there's like a planet B that's trucking along and we're coming through, and then they're going to have a retrograde here. Okay, so that's the premise of this idea. But I have way more explanation to give. So, first of all, I want to talk about how retrograde is considered abnormal, and that's why it's uncomfortable. Now, I am having issue with the word normal, and I'm going to get into it. So first of all, talking about it's abnormal for the planet and that makes them uncomfortable. So we talk about, a planet is usually going direct. That's the normal order of things. We love it. We love to see it. Life is moving the way it's supposed to. And then they stop, and then they turn around, and then they stop, and then they have to recover that, and then they keep going again. That's the normal retrograde, or that's the normal path of a planet. And what I want to say is that's normal. At some point, you have to say that year after year after year, millennia after millennia, eon after eon, the planet themselves thinks, well, this is pretty normal, right? At some point in your maturation and in your growth, the stops, the snafus, the end of a relationship, the having to walk through hell, the slowdown, the aggravation, it is normal. It's part of the cycle. It's part of the greater balance. It isn't like it shouldn't be this way. This isn't supposed to happen. No, it's just the other side of the coin. Not every relationship lasts forever. Whichever planet you want to use as your entry point, and then think about what a retrograde might mean for them. Now, I'm not saying that it's not uncomfortable. I'm not saying that there is the sense of like, well, this isn't so usual, or like, a coincidence, with the retrogrades. As well, I saw someone recently on Reddit say that a retrograde planet operates as if it's in the opposite sign. So, like, that's all still true. I'm not trying to take away the idea that retrogrades are impactful. I want to focus on the idea of using the word normal. And my little spiel here is that the term normal is coming from, when we look at like statistics, we have this whole population that we've measured, and then we have the exact mean of it, and we call this the normal because I have a different video on a different channel that I will link this to. Almost all of the population, like 96% of the population, is going to fit within this range, which has what we call the normal. And then you have, it's like 68 or something percent of the population fall within like a greater range. And then the remaining 30% or whatever we're dealing with, the remaining little bits are these populations here. And so culturally, we have this idea of like that's normal and that's abnormal. But if you were to do statistics, if you were to measure the entire population, these populations are part of the whole concept of normal. And if you were to do like a study and you were to have a cutoff at the 68th percentile and not have these populations, you've done your study wrong. You have not captured the whole population. The numbers should be here. It's part of the whole thing. And so this is also like, yeah, it's uncomfortable. It's not as common, but it's still in the greater idea of what's normal. It is normal for, the planet to be going into retrograde. It is normal for that to be part of the cycle. And then what this comes down to as well is like when we're talking about like neurodivergent or neurotypical or whatever, if you hear all the time that Mercury retrograde is not normal and that's uncomfortable, if you have Mercury retrograde and you're neurodivergent, or you have, something going on with the way you think, the way you communicate, the way you act, the way you use your hands, that has to do with Mercury being retrograde. And now every astrologer you talk to, everybody that's trying to talk to you about astrology goes, oh, well, that's not normal. That's not a normal expression for him. So he's uncomfortable. Like, what does that do to you thinking like, so I'm not normal? I am not a normal expression of Mercury. Where every expression of Mercury is normal, he does it all. He's part of everything. He's available in all. Like Mercury, especially Mercury, can show up in any scene, in any guise, and it's totally natural and normal for him to be there. And so I would like to see different verbiage around retrograde being normal or abnormal. I would like to use more comfortable, fast. For Mercury and Mars, they want to be fast, and then we slow down. It's normal for them to slow down. It's part of their cycle. For them to never slow down, that would be abnormal. That would be uncomfortable. To never slow down, to never go back. When Mercury stops having retrogrades, that's what's going to be abnormal. So in the meantime, it's uncomfortable. And now coming back to this idea of planet 1 and planet 2, I feel like it's uncomfortable for the other planet. So if you have an angle or you have a natal planet or whatever, what we've had is we've had an opposition of a planet, cool, normal, and then this little blank blind spot where they're coming off of it. We need a moment anyway to de-stress and stabilize from whatever that was. And then we have the trine, and then we have the square, and then we have the sextile, and now they're coming up. We expect it. It's going to happen. So if you have a planet that you're expecting to come up to this point, another planet, a transiting planet, that's waiting for that conjunction, and it doesn't happen because they slowed down and they retrograded, well, now that is frustrating for this planet. That is not normal for this planet, who is like, well, I thought you were coming right in, So I have a different illustration for this. Oh yeah, so here's my note. So retrograde, normalcy, the idea of normal, especially when we're talking about like neurodivergence, or like calling people who have placements that are in retrograde or stationing abnormal, eventually that's what you're saying, right? Like if you follow that dominoes down, if you're saying that it's not normal for Mercury to be retrograde, you're saying everybody that has Mercury retrograde isn't normal. And again, we're all part of the normal. Like it would be abnormal to have nobody have those placements, right? So what if we could go from normal to preferred, right? Because these are giant cycles that take a really long time, and if we're considering, some people consider the planets as like gods, let's give the gods some credit. We anthropomorphize, we personify the planets a lot, or they anthropomorphized us, depending, chicken and egg, who came first. Like, let's give some credit that they are fully aware of and in their cycles, and they take it in stride, right? So it is normal, but it just may not be preferred. Everyone prefers to be in love. Nobody wants to break up. Everybody prefers to be with their partner forever, and nobody wants that relationship to end, but it has to happen. You have to walk through hell sometimes, right? Like I'm talking about the Venus retrograde. And that's part of life. That's normal. So, my illustration, back to the point. I'm very passionate about this topic, obviously. So we're going to do the house idea. We have the conjunction, the semisextile, the sextile, the square, the trine, the quincunx, the opposition. My example is going to be that you are at home playing video games, and content warning if you grew up with an angry dad, your angry dad, or like your dad who's like, maybe he's strict, is over at work in the opposition. He's there. There's no reason for him to be anywhere else. You know what's going on. He's going to be there till 5 p.m., right? And then He's going to leave work and presumably come home. This is the blind spot. He could not come home. He could go grocery shopping. He could go get pizza. He could go to the bar. He could do whatever he's going to do after work that isn't coming home. So this is the blind spot. But now we have from your, view in the house, like maybe you're sitting, this is millennial 90s kid. Maybe you're sitting at the computer in the living room, and you've got this big window, and out of the window you can see that dad pulls up into the driveway. Okay? Great. That's the trine. He's pulling in. And then you see him get out of the car. That's the square. Now, if he's an angry guy, now maybe the emotions start, right? They start with the trine because, oh, he's home. Let me close down the computer and put away my snacks. And then the square, oh, he sees me. Like now there's a possibility that he'll see me through the window because I can see him. And then the sextile is he's walking up to the door, like along the path. And then this area here between like the wall where he's behind the wall, you can't see him through the window anymore, but he's about to come in the door. That's the semisextile. Now, if he were to slow down and stop and think, well, maybe I will go get pizza, or maybe I won't yell at this person today, or whatever, if he's having a little like, maybe, you don't know what's going to happen until he walks in the door, or you see him go back into the sextile range to go back to the car to go get the pizza, whatever it's going to be. And so now this is suspense. This is, I don't know if he's coming or going. This is the uncomfortableness of the sextile. Not that the planet is uncomfortable, that's doing a retrograde, but that the planet or the point that's waiting for this to show up or go back out, I don't know what you're doing, what are you doing, that's uncomfortable for this reference point, and not, sorry, my cat is playing in the fort I made him, in this reference point, and not necessarily uncomfortable for the planet doing it, because again, we're going to give credit that the planet is always knowing what it's doing. The planet itself is like, maybe I'll stop and I'll go back because I don't really like this trajectory on. So I'm going to choose to do this part here to like reset my path, right? That is my idea on quincunxes and semisextiles and how they may or may not influence the themes we have around retrograde, specifically being times of like, what's going on? This isn't normal. It's not what I was expecting. I wanted it to, I thought it was going to have a certain trajectory, a certain momentum, and now that's gone. And I feel like that comes from the reference point of a planet waiting for a retrograde planet to come around, and not actually the experience of the retrograding planet. Because you are always who you are, where you are, right? And we always kind of feel like we're in control. And we have little, whatever, we'll say 50 to 90 year lifespans at kind of the top end, without like tragedy or anything happening in the low end. And the planets themselves have been around way longer than that. And so if we are giving them like a personification and like a personality, why would that personality not have taken it in stride? Is my opinion. Okay. I'm not going to put my little Sarah McLachlan sad spiel on here. Because I've got the camera out, I'm going to show you my little tracker here. It is now November 9. I'm good probably until around the 18th or the 20th of November. But I've got nothing. I've got no rent. I've got no plan. I have no income. And I would like to stay housed to keep doing this and just stay housed in general. So if you have anything to spare and if you would like to support me, I am receiving. There's links below. Thank you so much. Bye bye.